Hello everyone, I hope you're well, hope you're doing alright. So, guys, a few months back, a student of mine came to me. Let's call him Jimmy for the sake of this video. Jimmy came to me and he said, Roy, things are not working out. You've taught me everything you know, you've taught me your strategies, however, things are still not looking great in my trading career. And therefore, we booked a meeting, we sat down, me and Jimmy together, and we looked at his track record. So what I did is I used some formulas to plot his track record in a graph, and this is what I saw. I saw that this is how his track record looked like. Now, going forward towards today, I just had a meeting with Jimmy right before this video here, and we looked again at his track record for the past few months, and this is what we saw. So, as you realize, there's a big difference between the two track records. This is now an ongoing consistent profitability for him. Beforehand, Jimmy would have instances of normal trading, some wins, some losses, some wins, some losses, just like this one right here. And then he would have just massive dips every now and then. So normal losses and then massive dips, then normal losses, then massive dips right there. And therefore, I thought to myself, let me record a video about this and let me tell you guys the solution that I suggested to Jimmy that made his track record go from this massive dips into consistent profitability right there. Let's get right into it. So I sat there with Jimmy's track record and I decided that I need to troubleshoot it in order to understand the problem so I can offer Jimmy a solution. So what I did first is I took, and this is how you can start troubleshooting the problem yourself if you have a similar track record. I took a few losses from the normal consistent profitability phase or normal consistent profitability season, which by the way, this is a track record along months, not just like a few days. So therefore, he would trade normally for like 2 months, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it might be, and then suddenly a massive dip. And therefore, I chose a few losses from the normal trading phase, and I chose a few losses from the dip phase. So in every normal phase, I chose a few losses, and in every dip phase, I chose a few losses. And what I did is I compared these losses together because I wanted to see how is he losing in a normal consistent profitability phase and how is he losing in a dip phase. Is there any difference? If yes, then I would start seeing where the problem is. And this is what I realized. When he is in his normal track record, normal consistent profitability phase, Jimmy would take what I call systematic losses. Now, what are systematic losses? Systematic losses are when you follow your trading system, but you still lose nonetheless because, of course, you don't have a 100% win rate, and therefore you will lose some trades. In other words, as well, what Jimmy would do right here in his normal trading phase is sometimes he would forget about a small rule. So let's say I told him, do not trade when there is an impulse right before your entry. You know, there has been some time that an impulse didn't happen, and therefore he'll forget about the rule, and then let's say 2 weeks later he'll take a trade that has an impulse which is against our rules, but he forgot about it, which is okay. I still count it as a systematic loss with a small human error here and there. It was okay when it came to the normal trading phase right here. Now in his dip phases, right there and right there and right there, Jimmy would take total unsystematic losses. The majority, so let's say 60, 65 or 70% of his losses in the dip phase were total unsystematic losses, which means imagine teaching someone to use a trendline strategy and it's working out great for them, and then at some point right here they choose to trade a break and retest strategy, and they just deviate from whatever you taught them and they start using outside systems that you haven't taught them or improvising or whatever it might be in this phase right here and receiving massive dips. So therefore, my question to Jimmy was, why are you shifting? Because of course I can tell him to stop shifting, but he already knows that. He already knows that he shouldn't shift his trading system. And therefore, why is he doing it to begin with, even though he knows it's wrong? And therefore I asked Jimmy, why the shift? And the reason why I was confused mostly, it's because Jimmy shifted at peak levels every time. So he didn't shift when he was in a massive losing streak, because if he shifted in a massive losing streak, then I would tell him, okay, in a massive losing streak, let's say maybe you're losing hope in the system because it's causing you a massive losing streak, and therefore you're shifting towards other systems which are causing you even more of a bigger dip, and therefore I would give him advice about how to deal with the losing streak and all that. However, he wasn't in a losing streak. Every time he's doing well, and then suddenly, boom, massive dip. Doing well, then suddenly, massive dip. Why are you shifting if you're doing so well right here? If you're receiving consistent profits right here for months, weeks, and days, why are you shifting suddenly to another system? That was my question for Jimmy. I started recalling the dates in which the dips happened. So for example, let's say this happened between 2 and 4 February. And this happened between 7 and 9 March. And this happened between, let's say, 11 and 15 November. Whatever it might be, I just recalled the dates of those dips and I started asking the questions. So between 2 and 4 February, where were you? Were you trading in your house? Were you in another country? How was work? How was your marriage? How were your kids? Did you receive any bad news? Compared to the normal phase, what was different between those dates and the dates that came before in your life? And this is what I realized. Now, in order to explain what I noticed, I have to explain the drug addict's behavior. So this is a drug addict. What happens generally is the drug addict would receive a problem, okay? That problem would cause some stress. That stress will, of course, deplete his dopamine levels, and therefore, as a result, the drug addict will escape reality and will seek external sources for him, its drugs, in order to replenish his dopamine levels. And therefore what he's trying to do is he's trying to counter the depletion of his dopamine levels by going to external sources and increasing his dopamine levels as a result. Now when it comes to a trader does the same. We do this drug addict behavior. And therefore what we do is we receive a problem, let's say, and in that case Jimmy receives a problem. He feels some stress. Dopamine levels are depleted, and therefore Jimmy would seek outside external sources to replenish his dopamine levels, and as a result seek the charts for some dopamine. Now the first thing that I want to explain is, why is that bad? If I feel stress and I go to my business to feel better, I go to my business to replenish my dopamine, isn't that a good habit that I should aim to maintain? At the end of the day, when the drug addict goes to drugs, he is hurting his health, hurting his pockets, and all in all, it's an unhealthy habit to have. But when I seek my business to feel some dopamine or to replenish my dopamine, isn't that a good habit that I should maintain? I'm going to explain why not by explaining something that I call the prioritization system. Now, what is the prioritization system? If we look at a drug addict's behavior, and let me ask you a question. When he seeks drugs, is he seeking drugs because he prioritizes his health, or his money, or his dopamine? The answer is, of course, he is not prioritizing his health, because otherwise he would never buy drugs. Of course, he's not prioritizing his money, because otherwise he would never buy drugs. So he is prioritizing his dopamine. So whatever you prioritize has a direct effect on what decisions you make. If I go to a restaurant or to the movies to watch a movie, am I prioritizing my money in doing so? No, I'm not, because prioritizing my money would be me never going to a restaurant or to a movie because I want to save that money. I want to preserve that money. Now, prioritizing my mental health or my dopamine or my whatever it might be from a neurochemical perspective, then I would go to the movies because I prioritize, let's say, my entertainment or my happiness or my mental health or my dopamine levels, whatever it might be. Since I prioritize my entertainment, then it's okay. I would go to the movie, I would go to the restaurant, I would go to all of those. And therefore, as I said, whatever we prioritize, we make decisions based upon it. And therefore, if we look at the charts, let's go back to the charts. Let's delete all of this. And let's go to the charts. Now, I want to ask you a question. If you look at the charts today and you find no trades, let me explain it in another way. There is things that you do in front of the charts that you know are wrong, but you still do them anyway, even though you know they are wrong. For example, a lot of you know that revenge trading is bad, but you still do it anyway. A lot of you know that overtrading is bad, but you still do it anyway. A lot of you know that improvising or shifting systems, or not sticking to your trading system, not sticking to your risk management, removing your TP, removing your stop loss, you all know that those acts are bad, but you still do them anyway. Now let me give you a very specific example. You wake up and there is no trades on the charts today. But what you do is you look at the charts and you contemplate forcing a trade. So you have no trades for the day, but you're like, you know what? I can still force a trade. Should I do it? Should I not do it? You're contemplating, you're looking at the charts, you're looking at the candlestick going up and down, and you want to make that decision. Now, if we think from a money perspective, from a trade and career perspective, if you prioritize money, then you would not do it. If that is the prioritization system that your brain is using, then you would not do it. But if your prioritization system is a spike in dopamine, then you would do it. And therefore, if you are making decisions right now that you know are wrong from a monetary perspective, from a trading perspective, from a trading career and track record perspective, then the only reason you are doing it because your brain isn't prioritizing your trading career, your brain isn't prioritizing money, your brain is prioritizing a spike in your dopamine levels, and therefore in order to satisfy that goal right here, forcing a trade is the best decision to make, because then it would spike your dopamine. However, not forcing a trade and not taking any trades for the day will not spike your dopamine levels, and therefore your brain is prioritizing this to make your decisions. And as I previously mentioned, whatever your brain prioritizes, whatever you prioritize, you will make decisions based upon it, following that thing. Even if you have multiple things that you're looking at, the first thing on your list, the first priority, will have a direct effect on what decision you end up making. And if your brain, as I said, prioritizes a spike in dopamine, then forcing a trade is the right decision. If your brain prioritizes monetary values, then your brain will be like, I don't want to force a trade, because you guys know, I don't need to explain it to you, that forcing a trade, improvising, not sticking to your trading system is bad for your trading career. You know this. I don't have to sit there. No mentor has to sit there and explain that to you and explain to you why improvising, why revenge trading, why overtrading is bad. We just have to convince you not to do it, even though you know it's wrong. Now, what is happening in your brain? As I said, your brain is prioritizing a spike in dopamine over monetary values, and this is why you end up doing it, even though your brain completely knows that it's bad from a financial perspective. In other words, guys, Jimmy's brain was prioritizing money right here and the preservation of his financials right in this phase. And then in those dip phases, his brain was shifting from a priority of money to a priority of dopamine. And therefore, when you prioritize something else, your brain will shift the decision-making mechanism and start taking decisions based on that something else. So the prioritization system is being shifted here, and that's what we needed to fix. We needed to fix the prioritization system so we never shift to dopamine on the charts, and this is what we started working on. Now, in order to stop this phenomenon from happening, where you receive a problem, depletion of your dopamine, you seek external sources for dopamine, and therefore you shift your prioritization system from money to dopamine because that's what you want to get right now. In order to stop this phenomenon, we can go on about it in two different ways. The first way is if I eliminate this path. So we have two different paths right here. We have this one and we have this one. So if I eliminate this one right there, the depletion of dopamine, then I don't need to seek the replenishing of my dopamine from the charts. So if I stop this, then there is no need for this. Then this is stopped immediately. So let's start working on solution number one. When you receive a problem and that problem depletes your dopamine levels, there's usually a step right in the middle here. A problem, an external event, doesn't immediately deplete your dopamine level. It's your interpretation of that problem that actually determines whether your dopamine levels will rise or be depleted right there. I'll give you a small example. Let's say I call someone on the phone. okay? And that someone doesn't reply to me, okay? So I call them and no answer. My interpretation can be two things. The first interpretation can be, okay, you know what? He's busy, he has kids, he's really busy with his family, he's really busy at work. There must be something going on for them to ignore my phone call. It was not done on purpose. Now, the second interpretation of the issue right there can be, for example, he's ignoring me on purpose, he's trying to avoid me. Let's say he's an employee of mine, he's trying to avoid the work that I'm trying to give him, he's trying to ignore my calls. So the second interpretation can be a negative interpretation. Now, of course, that negative interpretation right there will cause a depletion in dopamine levels. However, this one won't. And therefore, I can eliminate the depletion of my dopamine levels simply by interpreting things positively. So I'll give you another example, an example that is very relatable to you guys. A trade and loss, okay? And I previously spoken about this in a previous YouTube videos, which is losing money, usually for you, or losing a trade equal losing money, which is bad. So right here, the problem of losing a trade, you interpreted it as losing money, and therefore this is bad, and therefore this depletes your dopamine levels. However, let's take the same issue, losing a trade. For me, if I take this trade and I journal it and I analyze it and I learn from it, I receive a new lesson. This new lesson end up making me a better trader. And me becoming a better trader will end up making me more money in the future. And therefore this problem was interpreted in a positive light right here, which gives me dopamine actually in that case. So I reversed the complete effect of that issue, which is losing a trade, simply by changing my interpretation of that event. I'll give you an example that is very extreme, but I've seen it happen in real life, which is death. Death is very extreme, and usually everyone who experiences a death of a loved one, let's say, will feel really bad negative emotions. However, I've seen really religious people. So first of all, right here, the problem, what is it? It's death. And usually people interpret death as goodbye. And therefore this is usually very sad, and it usually depletes the dopamine of everyone. However, there are some really religious people, really spiritual people who, there's a lot of religious people, not really religious people, who believe, if you believe in any religion, then you believe that once we die, we go to another place. And then once I die, so let's say someone else died, they went to that other place, and once I die, I will follow that person to that other place, and therefore we will get to meet again in that new place. Any person who believes in a religion, therefore would believe in this outcome. However, really, really religious people believe in it like with all their hearts and mind, and therefore it's constantly in their brain. And therefore, when they receive the death of a loved one, instead of seeing it as goodbye, which is a very sad outcome, they see it as until I see you again. Because eventually they will meet again. And therefore, as they interpret it like that, it feels, I'm not going to say that it feels positive and they're the happiest now and they're like clapping because someone died. No, but they will feel less negative than the person who considers it as goodbye. For example, an atheist would believe that a person who dies goes into nothingness, and therefore they will never meet that person again, and therefore this is very sad. However, a religious person believes that they will meet that person again in the future, and therefore it's until I see you again, which is, to say the least, less sad, at least, than this outcome right here. And therefore your interpretation even of death, how you interpret something as big as death, can influence how you feel. It's not death itself that is sad, it is your interpretation of it. Something as big as death, how you interpret it, can influence how you feel. And therefore anything else, no matter what your problem is, there is a way to interpret it that won't deplete your dopamine as much. You interpret things in a very sad manner, in a very evil bad victim mentality manner, and therefore your dopamine levels are always so depleted to the point where you seek dopamine from outside sources like the charts, like scrolling all the time on social media, gambling, or whatever it might be. However, if you take that problem that you have, I just gave you an example about death, and therefore if you take that whatever problem that you have right now that is not death, I'm assuming, then you will have an interpretation of it that can make it a lot less sad. And therefore, all you need to do to eliminate that first path right here, all you need to do is to add a positive interpretation in the middle, and then your dopamine levels won't be depleted right there. Now, guys, be naive, okay? Be optimistic. Who gives a fuck? Like, people will call you, oh, you're too naive, you know nothing about life, you think that everything is roses and sunshines and all that. Don't get dragged on with society on how you need to behave and how you need to think, and that you need to think in a negative manner in order to be realistic. No, be positive. Interpret things positively. Find positive interpretations for things, because this is the best thing you can do for your stress levels, even if you don't seek the charts as a dopamine level. Let's say you don't have this drug addict behavior. Less stress in general will increase your performance in every aspect of life, in your relationships, in your business, in your health. Your health would be better if you interpret things positively. And therefore, don't let society drag you down towards that negative victim thinking because you're trying to be realistic and not optimistic and naive. No. Be optimistic, be positive, interpret things positively, see opportunity in everything, try to make the best of it, because only then, if you lower stress, your performance will increase and your health will increase as a result, which means you get to lead a better life than the majority of society. So why listen to the people in which you will lead a better life than them? And therefore, this is what I wanted to say about path number 1. Now, path number 2, which of course, guys, you will not be capable of eliminating stress completely. We are still humans and we will feel stress here and there. And also we are on a learning path. If you know how to deal with, let's say, a sudden bill or whatever it might be, something new is going to happen in your life that you haven't dealt with before. Maybe you get a sick parent and you have never dealt with that before in your life, and it is the first time you're actually dealing with this, and therefore you will feel stressed because you haven't learned how to deal with that stress before. And therefore, stress is not something that is avoidable all the time. However, you can learn to avoid it as much as you can. So when stress happens, regardless of what you're trying to do, then how do we eliminate this path? How do I stop seeking the charts as a way to replenish my dopamine? Let's discuss that. How do we eliminate this? There's something really important to say here before we jump into this topic. Now, I no longer want to talk about drug addicts and alcoholics. I want to speak about what I'm an expert in, which is traders, and I want to tell you the advice that I gave Jimmy. But first, I need to explain something to you. When we say that a trader is seeking dopamine, or any human being is seeking dopamine, technically, we're not consciously seeking dopamine. I don't sit here and I'm like, oh my God, I need some dopamine. Like it's some sort of food or something that I can just easily get. Like I'm aiming for dopamine. No, we seek dopamine by seeking certain emotions. For example, if I eat right now, if I'm hungry and I eat, that gives me dopamine. Now, if I feel hope, for example, when people meditate and visualize in the morning, the reason why it's a healthy activity to do, because as you visualize a better future, you feel hope, and that hope increases your dopamine levels in your body without you basically doing any activity. You just sat there and you visualized for a few minutes, and then boom, your dopamine levels are replenished, you have more energy and all that as a result of that hope. Pleasure, sexual, or you eat and you feel pleasure, whatever it might be, gets you dopamine. So therefore, there's a lot of different emotions that generate dopamine. And therefore, when we say a trader is seeking dopamine on the charts, it means he is seeking certain emotions that would generate that dopamine. Now, what are the emotions that a trader would seek on the charts that would replenish his dopamine in general? One of these emotions is pride, and the other is the progress. Both these emotions generate dopamine, And this is what the trader is usually seeking. And therefore, if I were to draw that last picture that I was drawing for most of this video here, when we say a trader, so let's detail everything. He would receive a problem, he would interpret that problem. As a result, dopamine would be depleted. Now, as a result, he would seek external sources. For what? For pride or progress, which is of course the charts in that case. So I will write the charts. And as a result, receive some dopamine. So that is the detailed graphic of that whole process. Problem, interpretation, dopamine depletion, charts to seek pride or progress, and then as you feel that pride or that progress, you receive replenishing of your dopamine levels. This is what we're basically seeking in front of the charts, is we're usually seeking pride and progress. Now, how do we seek both these emotions? Usually, we tend to say that progress is the act of taking a trade. This is the way that we usually see it. So if I go to the charts right now and I take a trade, that is progress, because I've done something new today that could make me money, and therefore the act of taking a trade gives me the emotion of progress, which gives me the dopamine that I need. The second emotion that we're trying to seek is pride, which is why people might do revenge trading, for example, or all that, because what they're trying to seek is a win. If I win a trade, that generates pride, and as a result of that pride, I get my dopamine. Now, how do I stop a trader from going there? Let's discuss that. Now, let me explain it in plain English first. If I am seeking the charts for pride and progress, and this is how I get my dopamine, let's say, from the charts. Now, if I can eliminate pride and eliminate progress from the charts, so if I can adopt a mentality where if I seek the charts, it wouldn't generate pride or progress, then I wouldn't seek it anymore, because it wouldn't give me pride and progress, and therefore I wouldn't receive my dopamine that I was seeking. So all I need to do is I need to adopt a certain mentality, or I need to give Jimmy a certain mindset here, where if you seek the charts, if you improvise right here, if you use a different trading system, if you force trades, whatever it might be, you will not receive a pride and progress. And if I can convince him that he will not receive a pride and progress, then I can convince his brain that he will not be receiving his dopamine by doing so. Then he would stop doing it, because it would stop being a rewarding activity for him to do. So how do we convince Jimmy that seeking the charts will not bring him pride and will not bring him progress? We need to change something about the way that he's thinking. Where does progress come from? For us, the way that any human would see progress is that if I do any kind of effort, that would generate progress, and that progress would generate some positive dopamine, right? Now, the problem with Jimmy and the problem with a lot of you guys is that you see effort as the act of taking a trade, and therefore as a result of that effort, of course, effort generates progress, as I said, then progress would be generated, and then as a result, dopamine would be generated. Now, I asked Jimmy something. I said, Jimmy, would it take more effort for you to actually force a trade or take a trade, or would it take more effort for you to restrain yourself from taking a trade? Jimmy thought about it for a moment, and then he realized that no, Roy, actually, it would take me a lot more effort for me to stop myself from taking a trade. And I said, since more effort is restraint, then as a result, since effort is progress, more restraint means more progress. So now, by understanding that more effort, that restraint is more effort, which is more progress, now that you understand that actual progress in trading, guys, is your ability to restrain yourself from doing weird shit in front of the charts. Effort is not clicking the buy and sell button. Clicking the buy and sell button is the easiest activity you can do. And if you're truly convinced with that, it's so easy to click the buy and sell button. I can go to the charts right now and click the buy and sell button. And therefore, once you understand how easy it is, you understand that it's not actually progress. Something that can be done so easily is of course not effort, and therefore is of course not progress. However, restraint is so hard. If I see something on the charts and my brain or my trading system is telling me not to do it, me stopping myself from doing it is actual effort, which is actual progress. So progress in trading isn't taking action. Progress in trading is restraint. And the moment you understand this equation, then feeling good will become you restraining yourself from doing bad things, as opposed to you trying to do good things on the charts and trying to buy and sell all the time. Let's discuss pride. I've asked Jimmy, I said, Jimmy, when you take a trade so luckily, and you make money because you improvised, because you didn't stick to your trading system, do you feel proud? And Jimmy looked at me and said, Roy, to be honest with you, yes, I feel proud because money is money. And if I generated more money, then I feel proud of myself. And I was like, okay. I drew his track record. And I said, do you feel proud of this? And he said, no. I said, are you ashamed of this? He said, kinda. Yeah, I'm ashamed of it. So I said, the result of your short-term pride is long-term shame. And it's the same thing everywhere, guys. When a drug addict seeks dopamine because he has a problem and his dopamine levels are diminishing, and he goes and he seeks dopamine. Yes, let's say you're an alcoholic. On the day on which you're drinking alcohol and partying, you will feel some positive dopamine, but the next day when you wake up, you will realize that you still have that problem, okay, which is depleting your dopamine, and on top of it, you have a hangover, and you have a headache, and you have all that, which further depletes your dopamine as well. And therefore, the result of short-term dopamine spike is long-term dopamine depletion. The result of short-term pride is long-term shame. And I further asked Jimmy, I said, Jimmy, why are you ashamed of that track record there? You felt pride here and here and here and here. You felt pride when you were doing your shit. So why do you feel shame right now? And Jimmy looked at it and he was like, because I feel like such a kid. I feel like because of my mood here and here, because of my problems, because of my mood, I fucked up what otherwise would have been a profitable track record. And I said, not only that, because of your mood, you now get to explain to your kids, to your wife, to your partner, to your family, why the fuck are you not succeeding yet? And if someone asks you that question, you will say, it was because of my mood. I received a problem, I had this happening with me, and therefore because of my mood, because I wanted to feel like a little princess, a little bit proud of myself, I fucked up my track record 4 times in a row just because I wanted to feel some emotions. I wanted to feel proud like a little princess. That caused shame on the long term. So again, I ask you again, are you proud that you took a trade and made money when you shouldn't have taken that trade? And once he realized that that short-term pride will lead to long-term shame, he was like, no, I'm not proud of it anymore. And therefore, that's the whole mindset shift that you need to do. In order to stop yourself from seeking the charts for dopamine, you have to stop the charts from making you feel progress and pride. How do we stop progress? By understanding that progress on the charts in the market is restraint. It is not the act of taking a trade. And therefore, if I see a trade right now that I shouldn't take, me taking it, it doesn't feel like progress. It feels like I'm fucking up. Me not taking it and stopping myself from taking it feels like progress. Restraint feels like progress. And therefore, my brain, I do not do effort in this, guys. I do not look at a trade that I shouldn't take and I have to force myself not to take it. Why? Because my brain wants to restrain itself automatically, because it understands that progress is restraint and it is what makes me get the most dopamine, and therefore it is what I'm trying to seek. And therefore automatically, as I see a trade that I shouldn't take, my brain's like, no, don't take it. Restraint, most progress, dopamine levels. And therefore that's how I stop the dopamine from progress. Now, how do I stop the dopamine from pride? By understanding that this short-term pride in which I get to take maybe a small win here and there because of a lucky trade that I took will result in long-term shame once I realize later on that I could have been profitable if I just stuck to my trading system and did everything naturally, but instead I wasted my time and I wasted the time of the people that believe in me. Why? Because I wanted to feel some emotions. I had a problem and I wanted to feel better about myself, and therefore I fucked up my whole track record. And I and Jimmy and no one would want to feel this on the long term. And therefore, if you want to avoid this shame on the long term, stick to your trading systems. And therefore, this is how I stopped the charts for Jimmy from being a source of pride and a source of progress. And this is how later on, a few months later, I looked at his journal and it was just an uprise with small dips here and there because he would receive a losing streak, but that's normal, of course, in any track record, but not massive dips as the one that we've seen before. This is how I solved Jimmy's problem, guys, and I hope this is helpful for you guys. Let me know if you'd like me to share more of instances of when I solved my students' problems regarding trading and all that in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.